Today we're going to talk about mixed and evening light, artificial light sources, and what they do in interior visualization. So I've been thinking for quite some time about how best to present this kind of information and how to explain it better. And I felt that the process of creating evening rendering would simply be just a repetition of what I've told you in previous videos, since technically there's not much new there. It really isn't that different. So in this render, the light is set using HDRI and artificial light sources, meaning it consists of lamps, and it's a simple evening, it's blue color, and I think the most important thing here is to understand how the light works here and how it differs from daylight. I made two renders. These are two light mixes. They're saved in CXR format, and I want to show you the difference between them and why one scene looks like it's a sunny day and the other one looks like it's evening. And so most importantly, the brightness of the light sources, the light from this chandelier and the floor lamp, are the same. I didn't change anything here. The only difference is the exposure and brightness of background outside the window. All of this is set up exactly as it would be in live or in a photo. So let's turn off all the lights in both setups and take them apart into their component elements. All right, so first, let's go ahead and put my words to test. And we'll take the main light from this chandelier here, which is the Corona Light 2, and here. And at first, it seems that this scene is brighter and lighter. But that's because of the difference in exposure values. Here's exposure is +1, and here it's -1. So if I set both of them to 0, the brightness of the light sources will be the same. So here's nothing changed basically. So now let's turn on the other light sources, assuming that the exposure is the same in both scenes. Now I'll turn on the fake lighting from the next room, because here in the daylight render, it was turned on. On the evening render, I added the next room's light so that this doorway doesn't look very dark, because it's already kind of dark spot there because of the evening lighting. And so next, let's deal with the light from the hallway behind us. As you can see, the camera is pointing into the room, and there's a doorway behind us that leads into the hallway. And here, I've added an extra light source to light up this area a little bit. So, in real life, you could just turn on the lights there. So I thought it would make sense, and I turn on this light source. So next up we have Corona Sun, and oddly enough, this is such a kind of small fake lighting. Now you needed to create a moonlight effect for curtains. You see, you can use the sun like this as well, because it's just a light source. Always keep that in mind. You can tweak it a little bit, put a blue override color and set a small intensity value, and then you'll have this kind of effect. And of course you could replace this with regular Corona light, V-ray light, it doesn't matter. So the next thing we should talk about is the floor lamp. And we had to have a floor lamp on both daytime and evening renders. So you see the light sources shine equally. But what's most important in this case is that the environment parameters. So in daylight, environment is very bright, and therefore the background is also bright, because environment and the background are inextricably connected. The background is in fact a source of light. Not literally, but you get the idea. So when we work with a render, we keep these parameters separate. Environment is just light, and the background, that is the plane with texture, is just an imitation of the picture we're creating. So you can think of it as of a decoration, but at the same time, their brightness should be roughly the same, so that there's no light mismatch. All right, so when we turn on environment setting for daylight, the whole scene is very bright. And in this case, we need to decrease exposure value. So we'll set it to -1. And what do we see? We see that all artificial light sources are no longer bright because of the lowered exposure value. And when we lower it, we can barely see the light from the chandelier above. This fake lighting from the next room, also gone. And also this floor lamp. And that's because of the relative brightness of the light. That's a general rule. The outside light is always very bright. So, what can we conclude from this? Even if you set up a lighting, turn on some kind of artificial light source, even in daytime render, but it shouldn't be too bright. It shouldn't block the main light source, which is the windows. Now, if I just turn off all of these artificial light sources when creating daytime render, nothing would change, basically. I mean, maybe some small details would appear, like a warm shade, but it doesn't affect the picture overall. So always keep that in mind. And if we talk about evening light, things are different. When environment is active, it's the second main source of light for this interior. Now let me turn on artificial light sources and slightly increase exposure to +1. You see, I can't light the room with environment alone because I get a blue and kind of a rather dark picture. So we make a point that when creating evening lighting, the light from the window, its brightness and brightness of artificial light sources like chandeliers should be equal. Okay? Not literally though. The brightness of light sources, their multipliers and lumens and default values should not have the same numerical value. They should be roughly equal visually, because if some artificial light sources are much brighter than the background, the picture will literally become a different shade. All right? So, for example, if the environment parameter was very bright, like with a value of 3, the picture would be blue. And even if we turn on artificial light sources, the picture is still blue. And this happens because this light from the window is the predominant one. And conversely, if we were to make some artificial light source very bright, like setting the light value from a chandelier to 4, the room would be mostly illuminated by that light source. The picture would then become yellow and look dull. So therefore, we need to strike a balance between artificial light sources of orange color and fill light, that is environment, which is blue color. So according to color theory, these colors, meaning blue and orange, are complementary. It's as if they complement, overlap one another. And in this case, the picture looks quite balanced. Therefore, always remember about exposure. Evening light outside the window is always dimmer than daylight. And it should be roughly equal in brightness to artificial light sources. If we're talking about daytime rendering, artificial light sources are only slightly active and don't affect lighting of the scene as a whole. So be careful and don't overdo it. A common mistake is to make the environment parameter not bright enough, like this. And the brightness of artificial light source is too bright, like this, for example. And in this case, you get something strange. The picture looks weird because it's kind of a sunny day outside the window, but there's some light here too. And this often comes from wanting to turn on all the light sources to show that there's a light inside the interior. But even if that's what you want, it doesn't mean that you have to inflate these values. You can just adjust them slightly. Even if you have a daytime render, you can add additional light. That's still acceptable. Just don't make it too bright. And in that case, your picture will look normal and balanced. And if you want to show all the benefits of evening light and illumination of your lamps, well, then you can just use an evening lighting pattern when the light outside the window is blue. And this can be either HDRI map, it can be Rava Fake, Corona Sky, or V-Ray Sky. You just need to make the light more blue and use color correction map. Then you simply turn on light sources one by one, and you'll get the scene. So this video is good for those who work both with Corona and V-Ray. And so I'll not make a special video with the V-Ray interface because it's exactly the same thing. But one last tip I wanted to give you is this. Use references. Pick a good reference for yourself and set up lighting style to match it. And here's one more little fake way to create evening lighting from daylight. In this case, you must have a light mix option enabled, and all light sources should be active. Otherwise, you won't be able to do anything. So you should note that this option is not perfect. Of course, it's better to customize everything from scratch. But if you don't have time at all, or you just need to make a preview, you can use it. So let's get down to it. We're gonna go into light mix, and first of all, we need to recolor environment. So I turn everything off except the background and the fill light, and I increase exposure value because I'm gonna need to compensate for my artificial light sources that are now off. So let me turn on chandelier and do this, and I'll increase exposure. And now the picture is overexposed. So I'll lower it down, make it 0.1. And you need to make sure that the light is fill light. Then we can recolor it, like make it blue, and then we can make it a bit warmer. Now we have a blue fill light, but the background is still daylight, so we can turn its value down a little bit as well, and we can recolor it blue. So the background and the fill light should have a consistent color. All right. So the brightness should still be sufficient. Next, we simply turn on artificial light sources. And now we have evening light. And again, this isn't the best or universal way of doing things. But if you want to quickly turn daylight into evening light, and if you have artificial light sources, you can definitely do it. All right, take care.